Welcome, and thank you for joining us once more on this tranquil journey into the past. As the world outside perhaps quiets around you, we invite your mind to travel back over 1,000 years, to a time when life pulsed to the demanding rhythm of the seasons, and winter was a force of nature that shaped every aspect of existence. Tonight, we begin to uncover the extraordinary story of how the Vikings, those iconic figures of history, didn't merely survive but, in fact, mastered the coldest nights and harshest winters of their world. Imagine, if you will, being present at the close of autumn, watching the last vestiges of green fade from the landscapes of Scandinavia. We're speaking of the lands that cradle modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the very heartland of the Norse people. Picture the Norwegian fjords, those majestic, deep-cut inlets, no longer shimmering with summer light, but now reflecting steely gray skies, their towering cliffs becoming dark, forbidding sentinels against a backdrop of gathering clouds. The crisp, clean air of autumn would give way to a biting chill that seemed to seep into one's very bones, a herald of the long, dark season to come. Further inland, in what is now Sweden, vast, ancient forests of pine and spruce, already dark and dense, would soon be cloaked in an impenetrable blanket of snow, their branches heavy and bowed. The countless lakes, shimmering jewels in summer, would begin their slow, inexorable transformation into sheets of solid ice, their surfaces becoming a new, dangerous, yet sometimes vital, pathway. Even in Denmark, the flatter, more arable lands, would feel the full brunt of the North Sea's icy breath, winds sweeping unimpeded across the open plains, carrying with them the stinging bite of frost. But the Viking world extended beyond these heartlands. Their spirit of exploration and settlement led them to lands where winter's grip was even more profound, more absolute. Consider Iceland, a volcanic island born of fire and ice, where the treeless plains offered little shelter from the relentless winds that funneled down from the Arctic. Or Greenland, truly the very edge of the known world, where vast ice sheets dominated the landscape, and the brief, fleeting summer was but a temporary reprieve from an almost perpetual winter. These were not places for the faint of heart, these were lands that demanded ultimate resilience. As the days crept towards the winter solstice, one of the most defining characteristics of the Norse winter began to assert itself, the retreat of the sun. In the northern reaches, above the Arctic Circle, the sun would dip below the horizon and simply, not reappear for weeks, sometimes even months. Imagine the profound impact of this. Not just a cold dusk, but day after day, week after week, of a pervasive twilight, or absolute darkness, punctuated only by the moon and the stars, or the ethereal dance of the aurora borealis. This wasn't merely an absence of light, it was a psychological trial. The human spirit naturally yearns for the sun's warmth and light. To live under such conditions, shrouded in an endless gloom, required an immense inner fortitude. The very concept of time might blur, days would merge into a single, extended night. Productivity, hunting, even simple outdoor tasks would become incredibly challenging, relying on whatever dim light might filter through the cloud cover, or the flickering glow of a torch. The cold itself was more than just a discomfort, it was a constant, pervasive enemy. Temperatures would plunge far, far below freezing, not for a day or two, but for extended periods. Water sources vital for survival, rivers, streams, even coastal areas, would freeze solid, transforming the landscape and cutting off access to resources. The very ground would harden into an unyielding, frozen shield. This prolonged exposure meant that the body was under constant assault, demanding a continuous output of energy just to maintain core temperature. Without proper protection, hypothermia and frostbite were not abstract fears, but very real, very present dangers that could claim a life swiftly and mercilessly. Every aspect of life transformed. The easy abundance of summer, the berries, the fish in open waters, the grazing animals, vanished. Survival became a meticulously planned, carefully executed, and communal effort. Food storage became paramount. The need for warmth was absolute. The very rhythm of society slowed, drawing people closer together within the insulated confines of their longhouses. The early Viking settlers, those brave pioneers who dared to lay down roots in these challenging lands, understood this reality intimately. They were not merely passing through, they were committing their lives, their families' lives, to these unforgiving environments. They couldn't simply pack up their dragon-headed longships and sail away when the first snows began to fall. Their survival depended entirely on their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their deep understanding of the natural world around them. This profound understanding of the unforgiving landscape, the biting cold, the endless darkness, the scarcity of resources, and the deep psychological impact it wrought, sets the foundational stage for our entire exploration. It underscores the immense challenge the Vikings embraced and ultimately overcame. Their methods of survival were not mere conveniences, they were vital, life-saving innovations born out of absolute necessity. Welcome back to our tranquil journey through the Viking past. In our last chapter, we set the stage, painting a picture of the Norse winter, a landscape transformed by ice and snow, and shrouded in a profound, often sunless, darkness. Now, we turn our attention from the vastness of the environment to the more immediate, insidious threat it posed to the human body, the cold itself. For the Vikings, the cold was not merely an inconvenience, it was a silent killer. Unlike a raiding party or a wild animal, it offered no warning roar, no glint of steel. It worked subtly, relentlessly, gradually stealing away warmth and life. To survive, they had to develop an intuitive, practical understanding of how their bodies reacted to the chill, long before modern science gave us terms like hypothermia or frostbite. Let's first understand what happens when a human body is exposed to extreme cold. Our bodies are remarkably efficient at maintaining a core temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the optimal temperature for all our vital organs to function. When the external temperature drops, our bodies instinctively fight to preserve this core warmth. The initial response is vasoconstriction. This is where the blood vessels near the surface of the skin constrict, narrowing to reduce blood flow to the extremities, fingers, toes, ears, nose. This is a brilliant, automatic defense mechanism, designed to keep warm blood circulating around the vital organs. But while it saves the core, it leaves the extremities vulnerable. This is why these parts of the body are often the first to suffer from cold exposure. If the exposure continues, and the body loses heat faster than it can produce it, the core temperature begins to drop. This is the onset of hypothermia. Imagine, slowly, gently, your body's furnace dimming. In its mild stages, hypothermia might manifest as shivering, an uncontrolled muscle tremor, the body's desperate attempt to generate heat. There might be clumsiness, confusion, and slurred speech. You might feel a profound lethargy, a desire to simply lie down and rest. This is particularly dangerous, as the very act of seeking warmth becomes difficult. As hypothermia deepens, the shivering might stop, paradoxically, as the body's energy reserves are depleted. The skin becomes cold and pale. The heart rate and breathing slow. In severe stages, consciousness can be lost, and without intervention, death is inevitable. The insidious nature of hypothermia is its ability to numb the very senses that would warn of danger. A person can slowly, imperceptibly, drift away without truly realizing the peril they are in. Then there is frostbite. While hypothermia is about the core body temperature, frostbite is about the freezing of body tissue. Remember those vasoconstricted extremities. If blood flow is severely restricted and the temperature drops low enough, ice crystals can actually form within the cells of the skin and underlying tissues. This damages the cells, cutting off circulation, and leading to tissue death. The affected area might first feel tingly, then numb, then hard and waxy. In severe cases, frostbite can lead to permanent damage, requiring amputation. The Vikings, through generations of lived experience, understood these dangers not by scientific terms, but by observation and consequence. They saw fingers and toes blacken and fall off. They saw individuals become confused and lethargic, never to wake up. They learned to read the subtle signs in themselves and their companions, the loss of dexterity, the slurred words, the unusual quietness. This intimate knowledge of the cold's effects drove their innovations. It taught them the absolute necessity of insulation, not just in their homes, but in their clothing. It taught them the importance of keeping active to generate body heat, but also the critical need to avoid excessive sweating, as dampness would accelerate heat loss. They learned to appreciate the quick warmth of a hot drink or a hearty meal. The constant battle against the cold shaped their daily routines, their architecture, their clothing choices, and even their social customs. Every decision was, in some way, a strategy against this relentless force. They learned that even a seemingly mild chill, if prolonged or combined with dampness, could be just as deadly as extreme frost. The phrase, "the quiet cold," might well have resonated deeply with them, recognizing its stealthy, merciless power. This fundamental understanding of the body's fight for warmth was the bedrock upon which all other survival strategies were built. It wasn't academic, it was deeply personal and immediately life-saving. In our next chapters, we will begin to explore the incredible ingenuity of the Vikings as they developed practical solutions to these physiological challenges, starting with the very foundations of their lives, their homes and shelters. For now, allow your mind to reflect on the silent strength of the human body, and the ancient wisdom passed down through generations, all focused on one paramount goal, to defy the silent killer that was the Norse winter. Welcome back to our tranquil exploration of Viking ingenuity. Having understood the profound challenge posed by the relentless Norse winter and the silent dangers of extreme cold, we now turn to perhaps the most crucial element of their survival, the shelter they built. More than just structures, these were bastions against the storm, warmth against the biting winds, and true homes in the harshest of lands. We are speaking, of course, primarily of the iconic Viking longhouses and turf houses. Imagine standing on a windswept, snow-covered plain, or nestled in a valley carved by glaciers, with the icy air stinging your face. What kind of building would you design to offer the ultimate protection? The Vikings, through centuries of trial and error, perfected a form of architecture that was remarkably suited to their environment, prioritizing insulation, durability, and communal warmth above all else. The most common and enduring image is that of the Viking longhouse. These were substantial, often enormous, structures that could house not just an extended family, but often their livestock as well, all under one colossal roof. Let's delve into their construction, material by material. The foundation was often built from stone, creating a sturdy, insulating base that prevented damp from seeping in and helped anchor the massive structure against strong winds. Upon this, a robust timber frame was erected. These were not delicate wooden structures. They were built from stout logs, often from pine or spruce, carefully hewn and joined, creating a skeletal framework that could bear immense weight. The availability of timber varied across the Norse world. In well-forested Scandinavia, wood was more abundant. However, in treeless Iceland or Greenland, every piece of driftwood or imported timber would have been precious, leading to different adaptations we'll discuss shortly. Now, for the walls and roof. This is where the Viking genius for insulation truly shone, particularly in the use of turf. In many areas, especially Iceland and parts of Norway and Greenland, timber was scarce. So, Vikings turned to the most abundant, readily available, and incredibly effective insulating material, sod, or turf. Imagine thick, rectangular blocks of earth, complete with dense root systems, carefully cut from the ground. These turf blocks were then stacked, often in layers, to form walls that could be several feet thick. Think of it as nature's own insulation panel. The earth and roots within these blocks provided an incredible thermal mass, slowly absorbing heat from inside and radiating it back, while simultaneously keeping the biting cold outside. The density of turf also made these walls incredibly sturdy, almost fortress-like, against high winds and driving snow. The roof, too, was typically a masterpiece of insulation. It would start with a timber frame, often supported by internal posts running down the length of the longhouse. Over this frame, layers of birch bark might be laid, a natural waterproof membrane, followed by more layers of turf. This created a heavy, incredibly thick, and supremely insulating roof, often covered with grass and wildflowers in summer, making the house literally blend into the landscape. This living roof added another layer of natural insulation, keeping the heat in during winter and the cool in during summer. The layout of the longhouse was also crucial to its warmth. These were typically rectangular, often long and narrow, with a single main entrance, usually at the side. Windows, if they existed at all, would have been small, mere slits or openings designed to keep heat loss to a minimum. Light primarily came from the central hearth, or from oil lamps. Inside, the longhouse was often divided into sections. The main living area would be a large, open space, dominated by a central hearth running down the length of the hall. This hearth was the beating heart of the home, a source of warmth, light, and cooking. Along the long walls, raised platforms or benches served as sleeping areas, often partitioned by curtains or simple wooden screens for privacy. Critically, many longhouses, particularly in the colder regions, incorporated stables for livestock at one end of the building. This was not just about convenience, it was a vital survival strategy. The body heat of the animals, cows, sheep, goats, contributed significantly to the overall warmth of the longhouse, creating a living, breathing Heat source. The manure, though messy, could be managed and eventually used as fertilizer. This integrated design meant that the family and their most valuable assets were safe, warm, and together under one roof, sharing and conserving precious heat. The construction of these buildings was a monumental undertaking, requiring communal effort and skilled craftsmanship. Each longhouse represented a significant investment of time and labor, a testament to the absolute necessity of robust shelter in a world defined by its harsh winters. They were not just dwellings. They were intricate systems, meticulously designed to create microclimates of survival within an otherwise unforgiving environment. As you reflect on the ingenuity of these structures, the stone foundations, the robust timber, the thick turf walls, and the integrated animal shelters, you begin to understand that Viking architecture was a direct, practical response to the demands of their environment. They didn't just build houses. They built fortresses of warmth against the storm, ensuring the continuity of their families and their way of life. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. In our last chapter, we envisioned the Viking longhouse, a remarkable feat of engineering and insulation, designed to defy the relentless Norse winter. Now, let's step inside, allowing our senses to adjust to the warmth and the gentle glow, and focus on the very heart of this incredible structure, the central hearth. More than just a place to burn fuel, the hearth was the pulsating core of Viking life during the long winter months. It was the original, multi-tool, of survival, providing not just heat, but light, a place for cooking, a hub for social interaction, and even a natural center for storytelling. Imagine the longhouse interior. A vast, open space, often dim, with light primarily emanating from this long, low stone hearth running down the center of the hall. The Vikings didn't have enclosed fireplaces with chimneys as we know them today. Instead, their hearths were open pits, often lined with stones or clay, directly on the earthen floor. This design allowed the heat to radiate freely in all directions, warming the entire space from the ground up. The smoke, a constant challenge, would rise to the ceiling, where a series of smoke vents or louvers, often adjustable, would allow some of it to escape. The primary function, of course, was warmth. In a world without central heating, the constant presence of fire was literally life-saving. The sustained heat from the hearth warmed the air, radiated into the thick turf walls, and even through the compacted earth floor, turning the entire structure into a giant, heat-retaining mass. During the coldest nights, families would huddle closer to the fire, drawing comfort from its steady warmth. But the hearth's utility extended far beyond mere temperature regulation. It was the primary source of light during the sunless periods. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the timber beams and the faces gathered around, creating an atmosphere both primal and comforting. This warm, organic light was a stark contrast to the vast, cold darkness outside, making the longhouse a beacon of safety and life. Crucially, the hearth was also the kitchen. All cooking was done directly over or adjacent to the open flames. Iron pots would hang from chains or tripods, simmering stews of preserved meats and vegetables. Fish would be roasted on spits, bread baked on hot stones, and water boiled for drinks and basic hygiene. The constant activity of preparing and sharing meals around the fire fostered a sense of community and provided essential calories and hydration, vital for maintaining body heat and energy in the cold. The choice of fuel was a critical survival decision. In areas rich with forests, such as parts of Norway and Sweden, wood was the primary fuel. Chopping and gathering wood was an arduous, year-round task, especially dangerous in winter. The type of wood mattered too. Dense hardwoods burned longer and hotter, but conifers like pine burned quickly and provided rapid warmth. They would also collect fallen branches and deadwood, ensuring a steady supply. However, in places like Iceland and Greenland, where trees were scarce, the Vikings adapted. They turned to other abundant resources. Peat, dried compacted layers of decomposed vegetation, became a crucial fuel source. Peat burns slowly and steadily, providing long-lasting heat, though it can be smoky. They also utilized animal dung, particularly from cattle, which when dried, provided a surprising amount of combustible material. Even dried fish bones and fat could be used in desperate times, burning slowly and contributing to the heat. This resourcefulness highlights their deep connection to the land and their ability to adapt to what was available. The constant challenge, as mentioned, was smoke management. With an open hearth, smoke was an unavoidable byproduct. The longhouse roof would have openings, often adjustable louvers, to allow smoke to escape. However, These openings also meant heat loss, so it was a constant balance. The smoke itself likely permeated everything: clothing, hair, the very fabric of the house, creating a distinctive, smoky aroma. While potentially irritating, the smoke also acted as a natural preservative, helping to cure meats hanging from the rafters and deterring insects. It was a trade-off, a necessary part of indoor life. Beyond its practical uses, the hearth held immense cultural and social significance. It was where families gathered after a long day. It was where sagas were recited, poems composed, and news exchanged. Children would play in its warmth, artisans would ply their crafts, and elders would share wisdom. The hearth represented safety, continuity, and the very spirit of the home. It was the place where community was forged and sustained through the long, dark, and isolating winter months. So, as we imagine the Vikings gathered around this vital source of life, let's appreciate the central hearth not just as a fire, but as the pulsating heart of their existence during the coldest nights. It was a testament to their resourcefulness, their communal spirit, and their unwavering determination to create warmth and life even in the face of nature's harshest challenges. Welcome back to our tranquil journey through the resilient past of the Vikings. We've explored the magnificent longhouse, a symbol of permanent settlement and communal warmth against the deep winter. But the Viking world was vast and varied, and their needs for shelter extended beyond the grand family home. Tonight, we'll delve into other ingenious forms of shelter, the often overlooked pit houses and the various temporary shelters that offered crucial protection when a longhouse wasn't feasible or available. Imagine a Viking, perhaps a hunter, a trader, or a lonely traveler, caught far from the warmth of their longhouse as a sudden snowstorm descends. Or consider a smaller, less affluent family setting up a more modest homestead. For these scenarios, different architectural solutions were needed, solutions that prioritized rapid construction, deep insulation, or portability. One of the most fascinating and effective forms of alternative shelter was the pit house, sometimes also known as an earth lodge or sunken featured building. As the name suggests, these were structures built partially or entirely into the ground. This wasn't unique to the Vikings. Many ancient cultures globally utilized earth for its incredible insulating properties. The concept is beautifully simple. Dig a pit, typically rectangular or oval, a few feet deep into the earth. This excavated soil then becomes part of the building material, piled up around the edges of the pit to form low walls. Over this pit, a simple roof structure of timber, branches, or even whalebone in areas where wood was extremely scarce would be erected, and then heavily covered with layers of turf, sod, earth, and perhaps even animal hides. The advantages of a pit house, especially in a cold climate, are immense. The earth itself is a phenomenal insulator. Once you dig down a few feet, the ground temperature tends to stabilize, remaining much warmer than the freezing air above. By burying much of the structure, the Vikings were tapping directly into this natural warmth. It created a remarkably stable internal temperature, protecting against both the bitter cold outside and the direct impact of winds. While perhaps not as spacious or grand as a longhouse, a pit house was remarkably cozy and energy efficient. A small fire inside could heat the space effectively with far less fuel than an above-ground dwelling. They were often used as workshops, storage areas, or as temporary dwellings before a more substantial longhouse could be built. For a single family or a small group, a pit house could be a lifeline, offering immediate and powerful protection. In some areas, archaeological evidence suggests they were used for seasonal activities, providing shelter during fishing or hunting expeditions far from the main settlement. Beyond these more permanent, albeit smaller, earth-sheltered homes, the Vikings also relied on temporary shelters born of necessity and ingenuity. Imagine being caught out on a journey in a sudden blizzard, miles from any settlement. Survival depended on improvising immediate protection. One simple yet effective method was creating a snow cave or quinsy. If the snow was deep enough, a snow cave could be dug, providing astonishing warmth. The compacted snow acts as an excellent insulator, trapping pockets of air. The temperature inside a well-constructed snow cave can hover around freezing, even if the outside temperature is 20 or 30 degrees below zero. These were often emergency shelters for hunters or travelers caught unexpectedly. Another variation involved using natural features. A rock overhang, a dense cluster of evergreen trees, or a natural depression in the ground could be quickly augmented to provide protection. Adding branches, animal hides, or piling up snow around these natural shelters could significantly increase their warmth and wind resistance. These weren't luxurious, but they were life-saving. Even during travels on frozen lakes or across vast snowscapes, Vikings might have used rudimentary shelters like small, tent-like structures made from hides and poles, perhaps weighted down with snow or stones. These would offer a quick windbreak and a place to build a small, contained fire, providing enough warmth for a short rest before continuing the arduous journey. The existence of these diverse shelters underscores the Vikings' deep understanding of their environment and their pragmatic approach to survival. They knew that one type of dwelling couldn't serve all purposes. Whether it was the permanent, communal warmth of the longhouse, the deeply insulated practicality of a pit house, or the immediate, life-saving refuge of a temporary snow shelter, each played a vital role in ensuring that the Norse people could endure the relentless grip of winter. As you reflect on these hidden havens and impromptu refuges, consider the profound resourcefulness required to create warmth and safety with nothing but the natural materials at hand. It speaks volumes about their connection to the land and their unwavering determination to thrive, no matter the season. In our next chapter, we'll turn our attention to the second skin of survival, the ingenious clothing and textiles that kept the Vikings warm from head to toe. Welcome back to our soothing journey into the heart of Viking winter survival. We've explored the stationary havens, the longhouses and earth shelters, that provided essential warmth against the relentless cold. But life in the Norse world wasn't confined to the home. To travel, hunt, farm, or simply endure the frigid outdoors, the Vikings needed a second skin, a portable insulation system that was just as effective as their thick walls. Tonight, we delve into the remarkable ingenuity of their clothing, focusing on the primary materials that literally kept them alive: wool, leather, and furs. Imagine stepping out of a warm longhouse into a biting winter wind. The immediate impact of the cold is intense. The body's natural defense mechanisms, as we discussed, begin to kick in. But these defenses are only truly effective if supplemented by proper external protection. This is where the Viking mastery of textiles and animal hides became paramount. At the absolute forefront of their cold weather wardrobe was wool. And not just any wool, but the hardy, resilient wool from the tough sheep that grazed the Norse lands. Wool is, in many ways, a miraculous fiber, especially for cold, damp climates. Unlike cotton, which loses its insulating properties when wet, wool retains its warmth even when damp or wet. This is because of its complex fiber structure, which traps air even when moisture is present. This quality was invaluable in a world of snow, sleet, and freezing rain. The process of turning raw wool into wearable fabric was a labor-intensive, year-round endeavor, often performed by women. First, the sheep would be shorn, often in spring. Then came the cleaning, carding, combing to align the fibers, and spinning. Imagine the rhythmic hum of a drop spindle or the gentle whir of a spinning wheel, as countless hours were dedicated to twisting raw wool into strong, consistent yarn. This yarn could then be woven on a loom into various weights and textures of fabric. From thick, dense weaves for outer garments to softer, finer weaves for inner layers, the versatility of wool was fully exploited. Wool's natural lanolin, a waxy substance, also gave it some natural water repellency, shedding light moisture. Furthermore, wool is naturally breathable, allowing moisture vapor from sweat to escape, which is crucial for preventing the chilling effect of dampness close to the skin. It also has a remarkable ability to resist odors, meaning garments could be worn for longer periods between washes, a practical advantage in a world where washing facilities were not always readily available, especially in winter. Beyond wool, leather was another fundamental material. Tanned animal hides, often from cows, goats, or seals, particularly in coastal and Arctic regions, provided durable, windproof, and water-resistant outer layers. Leather was used for sturdy trousers, jackets, belts, and, crucially, for footwear. The tanning process, often involving bark and other natural substances, would have been a long and smelly, but essential, craft, transforming raw hide into a flexible yet tough material. A well-made leather tunic or cloak would offer a formidable barrier against the biting wind and driving snow. And then there were furs. Luxurious and incredibly warm, furs provided the ultimate insulation for the harshest conditions. Animals like fox, lynx, beaver, bear, and various smaller creatures would have been hunted or trapped not just for their meat, but specifically for their pelts. These furs would be carefully prepared, cleaned, scraped, and sometimes treated, to create soft, dense insulation. Furs would be used to line cloaks, for hoods, collars, mittens, and as trim on other garments. The air trapped within the dense undercoat of fur animals offered superior warmth-to-weight ratio. While likely reserved for those who could afford or procure them, furs were the pinnacle of cold weather protection. The Vikings understood the principle of layering intuitively. They would wear multiple layers of wool garments, perhaps a thin woolen tunic close to the skin, followed by a thicker tunic, and then a heavy woolen overcoat or cloak. This layering created air pockets that trapped body heat, providing superior insulation compared to a single thick garment. It also allowed them to adjust their clothing based on activity levels, removing a layer when working hard to prevent overheating and sweating, and adding it back when resting. The combination of these materials, the warmth and breathability of wool, the wind and water resistance of leather, and the supreme insulation of fur, created a highly effective and adaptable clothing system. It allowed the Vikings to work, travel, and survive outdoors for extended periods, even when the thermometer plunged far below freezing. Their clothing wasn't just practical, it was a testament to their deep understanding of their environment and their mastery of natural resources. As you reflect on the textures and properties of these ancient materials, consider the skill and dedication involved in transforming raw fibers and hides into life-saving garments. The clothing of the Vikings was not merely fashion, it was a carefully engineered shield against the elements, a testament to their enduring resilience. In our next chapter, we will continue our exploration of their winter wardrobe, focusing on the specific items that protected the most vulnerable parts of the body, their hats, mittens, and footwear. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. In our last chapter, we explored the remarkable properties of wool, leather, and fur, the very fibers and hides that formed the core of Viking cold weather attire. Tonight, we'll delve into how these materials were specifically crafted into the crucial pieces of clothing that protected the body's most exposed and susceptible areas, the head, hands, and feet. These items were not mere accessories, they were vital components in the battle against frostbite and hypothermia, quite literally protecting the extremities from the silent killer we discussed earlier. Let's begin at the very top, the head. It's a well-known fact that a significant amount of body heat can be lost through the head, as it's typically an uncovered area with a rich blood supply. For the Vikings, protecting the head was paramount. Their solutions were practical and effective. The most common form of headwear would have been woolen caps or hoods. These were often simple, close-fitting designs made from thick, felted wool. Felted wool, created by compacting wool fibers under heat and moisture, forms a dense, wind-resistant fabric that offers exceptional insulation. These caps would often cover the ears and forehead, areas highly susceptible to frostbite. Some hoods would be integrated directly into cloaks or tunics, providing a seamless layer of warmth that extended from the body, preventing cold air from creeping in. Imagine the comforting embrace of a thick woolen hood, muffling the sounds of the biting wind, allowing only the gentlest whisper of the frozen air to reach your ears. This warmth on the head helped the entire body retain heat. Next, we move to the hands. Our hands, with their intricate network of small blood vessels and delicate bones, are incredibly vulnerable to cold. Loss of dexterity due to cold hands can be crippling, making simple tasks like tying a knot, handling tools, or even gripping a weapon almost impossible. The Vikings understood this intimately. Their primary solution was the mitten. While gloves offer greater dexterity, mittens are far superior for warmth. By keeping the fingers together, mittens allow them to share warmth, creating a small, communal microclimate of heat. Viking mittens would have been crafted from thick, densely woven or felted wool. Some might have had an inner lining of softer wool or perhaps even rabbit fur for added comfort and insulation. Outer mittens could be made of leather or even sealskin, providing a windproof and water-resistant barrier, essential for tasks like handling wet ropes on a ship or fishing in icy waters. The design would often feature a long cuff, extending well past the wrist to overlap with the sleeves of a tunic or coat, ensuring no gaps for the cold to penetrate. Imagine the relief of sliding your chilled hands into a pair of thick, warm woolen mittens after hours exposed to the cold, a simple comfort that meant the difference between functionality and frozen agony. Finally, we arrive at the feet. The feet are arguably the most critical extremities to protect in a cold environment, not just for comfort but for mobility and survival. Frostbite in the feet can lead to debilitating injuries, making walking, hunting, or escaping danger impossible. The Viking approach to footwear was multi-layered and ingenious. Directly against the skin, they would wear woolen socks or foot wraps. These weren't necessarily knitted socks as we know them today, but often pieces of woolen cloth carefully wrapped around the foot, providing a soft, insulating layer that absorbed moisture. Wool's ability to retain warmth even when damp was again crucial here, as feet are prone to sweating. Over these inner layers came the shoes or boots. These were typically made from leather, often from cattle hide, which is robust and relatively waterproof when treated. The construction would involve multiple layers of leather for the soles, providing insulation from the frozen ground. The uppers would be sewn together, often using a turn shoe method where the shoe was constructed inside out and then turned right side out, hiding the seams and making it more water resistant. Designs varied, but many would have been ankle high or slightly higher, providing support and keeping snow out. For even greater protection, especially in deep snow or during long journeys, Vikings might have used leggings or leg wraps made of wool or leather, extending from the knee down over the top of the boots. These would prevent snow from entering the footwear and provide an additional layer of insulation for the lower legs. In some regions, early forms of snowshoes or skis, which we'll discuss in a later chapter, would be employed to distribute weight and prevent sinking into deep snow, further aiding foot protection by reducing direct contact with the most extreme cold. The constant challenge with footwear, as with all clothing, was managing moisture. While wool helps, long exposure to dampness and sweat could still lead to chilling. Therefore, changing socks or drying footwear by the fire would have been a routine necessity whenever possible, perhaps during rests in the longhouse or temporary shelters. These seemingly simple items, the humble cap, the warm mitten, the sturdy boot, were, in fact, sophisticated pieces of ancient technology. They were born of necessity and perfected through generations of living in extreme conditions. Each piece played a vital role in creating a micro-environment of warmth around the body, allowing the Vikings to endure, to explore, and to conquer the coldest nights. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to appreciate the intricate layering and material choices that protected the Viking from head to toe. It's a quiet testament to their practical wisdom and their unwavering determination to thrive, even when every breath was a visible cloud in the frosty air. In our next chapter, we'll shift from what they wore to what they ate, delving into the ingenious methods the Vikings used to preserve and find food throughout the lean winter months. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. As the Norse world spiraled into the deep chill of winter, one of the most pressing concerns for every Viking household was the securing of food. The vibrant life of summer, with its abundant berries, easily caught fish, and grazing animals, would vanish under a blanket of snow and ice. Survival through the long, lean months depended entirely on the foresight and ingenuity applied during the warmer seasons. Tonight, we will explore the critical art of preserving the harvest, the ingenious storage techniques that ensured the Vikings had vital sustenance when nature offered little. Imagine the urgency and collective effort that would grip a Viking community as autumn drew to a close. Every available hand would be engaged in processing and storing food, knowing that failure to do so could mean starvation. They didn't have refrigerators or freezers, but they possessed a profound understanding of natural processes that allowed them to keep food edible for many months, even years. Perhaps the most common and effective method, especially for meat and fish, was salting. Salt, a precious commodity, was a powerful natural preservative. When meat or fish is heavily packed in salt, the salt draws out the moisture, making it inhospitable for the bacteria that cause spoilage. Large barrels or pits would be used for this. Fish, often caught in vast quantities during spring and summer migrations, would be split open and layered with coarse salt. Meats, after a successful hunt or autumn slaughter, would be butchered and similarly salted. This process transformed perishable goods into stable, energy-rich provisions that could sustain a family through the entire winter and beyond. Another widely used technique, particularly for fish and some meats, was drying. In the crisp, often windy air of the Norse lands, drying was a highly efficient method. Stockfish, for instance, was a cornerstone of the Viking diet, especially in regions like Norway and Iceland where cod was abundant. Fish would be gutted, split, and hung on large wooden racks in the open air, where the wind and sun would slowly desiccate them. The cold, dry air of autumn and early winter was perfect for this. The resulting product was incredibly light, durable, and packed with protein. While tough and requiring rehydration, a piece of stockfish could literally provide days of sustenance. Meat could also be thinly sliced and dried, creating a form of jerky that was portable and long-lasting. Smoking was a third crucial method, adding flavor while also acting as a powerful preservative. Smoking involved exposing meat or fish to the smoke from smoldering wood, which contains compounds that inhibit bacterial growth. It also helps to dry the food further. Imagine the longhouse rafters, festooned with smoked fish and strips of meat, slowly curing in the ambient smoke from the central hearth. This technique not only preserved food but also added a unique taste that would have been highly prized during the long winter months. While less common for bulk preservation, fermentation also played a role, especially with dairy products. Skyr, a thick, cultured dairy product similar to yogurt, was a staple in Iceland, and various forms of fermented milk or cheese would have been common. Fermentation not only preserved milk but also enhanced its nutritional value and digestibility. Some vegetables, if available, might also have been preserved through lactofermentation, similar to pickling. Beyond the processing methods, the storage locations themselves were ingeniously designed to extend the life of these preserved goods. Root cellars were essential. These were typically underground pits, or even small, excavated rooms, designed to maintain a consistent, cool, and relatively humid temperature throughout the winter. Here, root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and parsnips, along with cabbages and apples, could be kept for many months, protected from freezing temperatures and spoilage. The Earth's natural insulation was once again put to ingenious use. In colder regions, simply relying on the ambient outdoor temperature for cold storage was common. Perishable goods that didn't freeze solid, or were intended for immediate use, might be kept in unheated sheds or storage areas where the cold acted as a natural refrigerator. Frozen meat and fish could be kept buried in snow or ice pits, remaining preserved for extended periods. Within the longhouse itself, areas away from the direct heat of the fire, or hanging from the rafters where smoke circulated, served as important storage spaces for dried and smoked goods, keeping them accessible and protected from pests. The combined effect of these preservation techniques was nothing short of a miracle for Viking survival. It transformed the unpredictable bounty of summer into a reliable pantry for winter. It was a testament to their deep practical knowledge, their understanding of natural processes, and their ability to harness the environment to their advantage. Every salted fish, every smoked piece of meat, every dried root vegetable, represented another day of warmth, another day of strength, another day closer to the return of spring. As you conclude this chapter, reflect on the immense effort and ingenuity involved in ensuring a community's sustenance through such a challenging season. It speaks to a profound respect for food, and a stark awareness that life itself depended on the foresight and labor of the harvest season. In our next chapter, we will delve into the actual winter diet itself, what these preserved foods looked like on the Viking plate, and how they provided the necessary nutrition to thrive in the cold. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. In our last chapter, we uncovered the meticulous methods the Vikings employed to preserve their harvest, ensuring a larder full of provisions for the lean months. Tonight, we imagine the longhouse at mealtime, the aromas of slow-cooked sustenance filling the air, as we explore the actual winter diet and nutrition that allowed the Vikings to thrive amidst the frost. For the Vikings, winter was a season of profound energy demand. Maintaining core body temperature in freezing conditions burns a tremendous amount of calories. Daily tasks, even within the relative warmth of the longhouse, required physical effort. Therefore, their winter diet was strategically designed to be rich in fats and proteins, providing the dense energy needed to fuel their bodies and ward off the cold. Let's look at the staple foods that dominated the Viking winter plate, largely drawn from those carefully preserved stores. Foremost among these, especially in coastal and island communities like Norway and Iceland, was dried fish, particularly stockfish. We've spoken of its preservation. Now, imagine its preparation. This incredibly tough, dried fish could not be eaten as is. It would typically be pounded with a mallet, sometimes for hours, to tenderize it. Then, it would be soaked in water, sometimes for days, too. Rehydrated before being boiled or added to stews. While it might sound laborious, stockfish was a powerhouse of lean protein, providing essential nutrients when other fresh protein sources were scarce. It was a reliable, highly transportable, and energy-dense food. Alongside fish, preserved meats were central. Whether salted, smoked, or air-dried, meats from cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and wild game provided crucial fats and proteins. These would be rehydrated and slow-cooked, often as part of hearty stews or porridges. Imagine thick slices of salted beef or mutton, slowly simmering over the central hearth, releasing rich aromas and creating a deeply satisfying meal. The fats from these meats were vital, providing more than double the calories per gram compared to carbohydrates or protein. Grains formed the backbone of their carbohydrate intake. Barley and rye were the primary cultivated grains. These would be ground into flour, not for delicate loaves, but for sturdy, unleavened flatbreads baked on hot stones, or for thick porridges and gruels. These grain-based dishes, often cooked with water, milk, or broth, provided sustained energy and fiber. They could be flavored with dried berries or honey if available, making them more palatable. A bowl of warm, thick gruel on a frigid morning would have been a profoundly comforting and energizing start to the day. Dairy products, particularly those that could be preserved, were also very important. Cheese and fermented milk products like skyr in Iceland provided valuable fats, proteins, and essential nutrients. Fresh milk from livestock kept inside the longhouse would be available, but fermentation extended its shelf life considerably. These dairy items would complement meals or serve as substantial snacks. Root vegetables, carefully stored in root cellars, provided crucial vitamins and minerals. Turnips, carrots, parsnips, and cabbages, though less calorically dense than meats or grains, added vital dietary diversity and prevented scurvy or other nutrient deficiencies. They would be added to stews or boiled alongside meats. Dried wild berries, if successfully gathered and preserved, could offer a touch of sweetness and additional vitamins. The most common form of meal preparation in the longhouse was the stew or potage. A large pot would constantly simmer over the central hearth, with new ingredients added throughout the day. This was efficient, made use of all available resources, and ensured a continuous supply of warm food. Bones would be boiled for broth, extracting every last bit of nutrition. Slow cooking also tenderized tough cuts of preserved meat and made dried foods more palatable. Hydration was another critical aspect. While water from melted snow and ice was readily available, it needed to be melted and often boiled to be safe. Hot drinks, including water infused with herbs, or fermented beverages, which we'll discuss in more detail in the next chapter, contributed to both hydration and internal warmth. The winter diet of the Vikings was not one of luxury, but of intelligent sustenance. It was a testament to their practicality, their understanding of energy needs, and their ability to maximize the nutritional value of every preserved item. Meals were often communal affairs, shared around the glowing hearth, strengthening family bonds and providing a sense of security and well-being against the harsh realities outside. As you reflect on the simple yet robust nature of these winter meals, consider how every bite was a deliberate act of survival, a testament to their foresight and resilience. The warmth generated from within, fueled by these hearty provisions, was just as crucial as the warmth of their homes and clothing. In our next chapter, we'll warm ourselves further by exploring the comforting and culturally significant role of drinks, particularly fermented beverages, in the Viking winter. Welcome back to our tranquil journey through the Viking past. As the Norse winter settled in, blanketing the landscape in snow and ice, the warmth of the longhouse hearth became ever more central to life. And gathered around that hearth, with stories being told and meals shared, another crucial element brought comfort and sustenance: the drinks, especially the fermented ones. For the Vikings, beverages were far more than mere thirst quenchers. They were sources of vital calories, agents of social bonding, and a way to bring internal warmth to the body during the coldest months. The most common and perhaps most important fermented drink in the Viking world was ale. This was not the clear, carbonated beer we know today, but a rich, often cloudy brew made primarily from barley, a staple grain cultivated in their lands. The brewing process was relatively simple, involving malting the barley, allowing it to sprout slightly to convert starches into sugars, mashing it in hot water, boiling the resulting liquid, and then fermenting it with yeast. Hops, commonly used in modern beer, were often absent or used sparingly. Instead, various local herbs, berries, or even bog myrtle might be used for flavor and preservation. Ale was a caloric powerhouse. In a diet where every calorie counted, especially during the strenuous winter, ale provided a readily available source of energy. Its alcohol content, though likely lower than modern strong beers, offered a perceived sense of warmth, helping to relax muscles and dull the biting edge of the cold. Imagine a Viking farmer, weary after tending to his livestock in the biting wind, coming indoors to a generous horn of warm ale. It would have been a profoundly comforting and restorative experience. Another iconic Viking beverage, often associated with feasting and special occasions, was mead. This honey wine was made by fermenting honey diluted with water. While honey was a valuable commodity, mead offered a sweeter, often stronger drink than ale, and was highly prized. The process was similar to ale brewing, but relied on the natural sugars in honey. Mead, too, contributed calories and warmth, and its preparation was often a more celebrated event, perhaps tied to rituals or important gatherings. Beyond ale and mead, Vikings would have experimented with other fermented drinks based on what was locally available. Fruit wines made from wild berries, if enough could be gathered and preserved, or even fermented birch sap in spring, might have been consumed. While water was the base for these, the fermentation process made them safer to drink than untreated water, as the alcohol and acidity killed many harmful microbes. The production process of these drinks, particularly ale, was a constant cycle. Brewing was a household chore, often overseen by the women of the household, much like cooking and textile production. Large wooden vats or pottery vessels would be used. The sheer volume of brewing suggests that these drinks were consumed regularly, not just for festivals, but as part of the daily diet, especially when clean drinking water might be an issue. The benefits of these fermented drinks in winter extended beyond just calories and warmth. Hydration. While alcoholic, they still provided liquid, especially important when water sources might be frozen. Warm ale could be particularly soothing. Morale boost. The communal sharing of drinks, the gentle buzz of alcohol, and the warmth it provided would undoubtedly lift spirits during the isolating and often monotonous winter months. It provided a sense of conviviality and respite from the constant struggle against the elements. Asterisk. Social bonding. Sharing a drinking horn or a cup of ale around the hearth reinforced social ties. It was a communal act, solidifying relationships within the family and wider community, a vital aspect of psychological survival during periods of limited external interaction. It's also important to remember that not all drinks were alcoholic. Water, from melted snow and ice, was the fundamental necessity. This water would often be heated over the hearth, sometimes infused with herbs or dried berries to create warming, non-alcoholic infusions. These would have provided hydration and comfort, especially for children or those not partaking in ale. Imagine sipping a steaming cup of herbal tea, perhaps made from chamomile or nettle, while listening to the wind howl outside, a simple, yet profoundly comforting ritual. The image of Vikings gathered around the central hearth, sharing stories and passing around drinking horns filled with ale or mead, is not just a romanticized one. It paints a picture of practical survival intertwined with deep cultural significance. The act of communal drinking was a powerful antidote to the isolation of winter, fostering resilience and fortifying the bonds that were essential for the group's continued well-being. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to savor the warmth and camaraderie that these drinks brought to the Norse winter. They were a testament to the Vikings' resourcefulness, their ability to transform simple grains and honey into life-sustaining and spirit-lifting beverages, defying the chill from within. In our next chapter, we will step outside the longhouse again, exploring how the Vikings moved across their frozen landscapes using ingenious tools like skis and snowshoes. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. As the Norse winter transformed the landscape into a vast, white expanse, the familiar paths and roadways often vanished under deep snow. Travel became arduous, slow, and potentially perilous. Yet, for hunting, trade, communication, or even warfare, the Vikings needed to traverse these frozen realms. Tonight, we uncover the ingenious tools that enabled their silent passage across snow and ice, the ancient yet remarkably effective skis, snowshoes, and sleds. Imagine stepping out into a world where every step sinks deep, making progress incredibly exhausting. The Vikings, and indeed other northern peoples, faced this daily reality. Their solution lay in distributing their weight over a larger surface area, and they excelled at it. Let's start with skis. The concept of skis is incredibly ancient, predating the Viking Age by thousands of years, with archaeological finds showing their use across Scandinavia. The Vikings were certainly proficient skiers, and skis were far from just a recreational pastime. For them, skis were essential tools for hunting, for efficient travel across vast, snow-covered territories, and even, at times, for warfare, allowing swift movement through challenging terrain. Viking skis weren't uniform. Early designs often featured one long ski for gliding and one shorter ski for pushing off, providing propulsion. Later, two skis of equal length became more common. These skis were typically made from wood, often pine, birch, or ash, chosen for its flexibility and strength. They would be carefully carved, smoothed, and sometimes treated with animal fat or tar to improve their glide. Bindings were simple, typically leather straps that held the foot securely but allowed for ankle flexibility. Imagine the feeling of gliding almost effortlessly over the snow, covering distances that would be impossible on foot, the only sound the soft hiss of wood on snow, and your own steady breath. This silent and swift movement offered a profound advantage. While skis were excellent for open, rolling terrain, snowshoes offered a different kind of mastery over the deep snow, particularly in dense forests or rugged, uneven ground. Unlike skis, which are designed for gliding, snowshoes are designed to keep the wearer on top of the snow by significantly increasing the surface area of the foot. Viking snowshoes would likely have been constructed from wooden frames, often oval or teardrop-shaped, with a latticework of rawhide or leather thongs woven across the opening. These simple yet effective designs allowed a person to walk over deep, soft snow without sinking deeply, making hunting, trapping, or foraging for firewood in heavily forested areas much more manageable. Imagine the almost buoyant feeling of walking where you would otherwise sink up to your waist, the wide frame supporting your weight as you moved quietly through the hushed, snow-laden woods. Finally, for moving heavier loads across the frozen landscape, the Vikings relied on sleds. These were the workhorses of winter transport. Sleds could range from simple, hand-pulled platforms for carrying firewood or small game, to more robust, larger sleds pulled by horses, or occasionally, though less commonly depicted for mainland Vikings than for more Arctic cultures, by powerful dogs. Viking sleds were typically constructed from wood, featuring smooth, robust runners that allowed them to glide efficiently over snow and ice. They could carry substantial weights, supplies for a distant outpost, game from a successful hunt, or materials for construction. Imagine the rhythmic crunch of runners on packed snow, perhaps the snorting breath of a horse, as vital provisions were brought back to the longhouse. Sleds were indispensable for logistics, making sure that resources gathered far afield could reach the community. Winter travel, even with these tools, remained challenging. Navigation could be difficult in featureless, snow-covered landscapes, especially during the short, dim days or long, dark nights. Dangers like avalanches in mountainous regions, thin ice over frozen waterways, and the constant threat of getting lost in a sudden blizzard were ever present. Yet, the ability to move across the snow provided immense freedom and opportunity. It meant that hunting grounds remained accessible, distant communities could still be reached, and vital resources could be procured, even when the world seemed locked in ice. These tools, skis for swift gliding, snowshoes for deep snow, and sleds for heavy loads, were not just means of transport. They were integral to the Viking way of life in winter, allowing them to extend their reach, sustain their communities, and maintain a connection to the wider world, even when it was covered in a blanket of white. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to envision the silent, determined figures gliding across the snow, their breath misting in the cold air, a testament to their enduring ingenuity and adaptability in the face of nature's formidable challenges. In our next chapter, we will delve deeper into the active pursuits of the winter months, exploring how the Vikings continued to secure food through ice fishing and winter hunting. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey through the Viking winter. We've learned how their ingenious shelters offered warmth and their preserved food sustained them through the lean months. But even with ample stores, the resourceful Viking knew that continued survival, and indeed, a varied diet, depended on actively engaging with the frozen world around them. Tonight, we explore the demanding, yet vital, skills of winter fishing and hunting, the art of drawing life from beneath the ice and from the snow-covered forests. Imagine a vast, frozen lake or a quiet, ice-bound fjord. Beneath that silent, unyielding surface, life still teemed. For the Vikings, ice fishing was a crucial way to procure fresh protein, especially in inland areas where freshwater fish like perch, pike, and trout were plentiful. In coastal areas where fjords froze, even cod might be accessible. The first challenge, and a potentially deadly one, was ensuring the safety of the ice itself. Through generations of experience, Vikings would have developed an intuitive understanding of ice thickness and stability, recognizing the danger signs of thin or unstable ice. They would test it carefully, perhaps with an axe or a long pole, listening for the particular sounds that indicated solid ground or treacherous water. Once a safe spot was identified, the work began. Holes in the thick ice would be cut, often using iron axes or specialized ice chisels. This was arduous physical labor in freezing temperatures, demanding strength and persistence. Once a hole was cleared, simple but effective techniques were employed. A basic fishing line with a bone or bronze hook, perhaps baited with a small piece of preserved fish or grub, would be lowered into the frigid water. Patience was key, as was a keen eye for the subtle tugs that indicated a bite. For larger fish, or in areas where fish were plentiful, spears might also be used, poised over the hole, ready to strike any fish that passed below. The reward, a shimmering, fresh fish pulled from the icy depths, was a valuable addition to the winter diet. Moving from the silent ice to the hushed forests, winter hunting presented a different set of challenges and required a distinct set of skills compared to hunting in warmer months. The deep snow, while hindering movement, also offered advantages. It made tracking animals much easier, as paw prints and trails were clearly visible. However, it also meant that the hunter himself had to be adept at moving through the snow, often relying on the skis and snowshoes we discussed in our last chapter to cover ground silently and efficiently. The target animals would vary by region. Deer, elk, and reindeer, where present, would be prime targets, providing not just meat but valuable fat, hides, and bones. Smaller game like hares, grouse, and other birds might also be pursued, offering a consistent, if smaller, contribution to the diet. Trapping was often a more reliable method than direct pursuit in winter. Snares, nets, and even pit traps carefully dug and camouflaged could be set to capture animals. This minimized direct confrontation and allowed hunters to set traps and check them periodically, reducing their exposure to the elements. Imagine setting a series of snares in the hushed, snow-laden woods, returning days later with anticipation, hoping to find a valuable catch. Every part of a hunted animal was precious. The meat provided essential protein and calories. The fur and hides were vital for clothing, blankets, and shelter. Fat was rendered down for cooking, lamps, and even for treating leather. Bones could be used for tools, needles, and even as fuel in desperate times. Nothing was wasted. Every element contributed to survival. The challenges and dangers of winter fishing and hunting were immense. Beyond the constant threat of exposure to the elements, there was the ever-present risk of thin ice for fishermen, or the peril of getting lost in a sudden whiteout or blizzard for hunters. Encounters with large, potentially dangerous animals, weakened by winter's grip, could also be life-threatening. These activities demanded not only skill and patience but also immense courage and a deep respect for the unforgiving power of nature. Yet, the rewards were profound. A successful fishing trip or hunt could replenish dwindling stores, provide fresh, nutrient-rich food, and boost the morale of an entire community. It was a testament to the Vikings' active engagement with their environment, demonstrating that even in the most challenging season, they possessed the skills and determination to secure their own sustenance. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to envision the quiet determination of the Viking fisherman patiently waiting by an ice hole, or the silent hunter tracking game through the snow. These were not just acts of survival, they were a continuous affirmation of their ability to adapt and thrive in the face of winter's relentless demands. In our next chapter, we will shift our focus to the health and well-being of the individual within these challenging conditions, exploring Viking hygiene and remedies in winter. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've explored how the Vikings built their strong shelters and procured food to survive the long, dark winter. But even with a full belly and a warm roof overhead, the challenges of the Norse winter posed significant threats to health and well-being. Tonight, we delve into how the Vikings, with their practical wisdom, sought to stave off sickness, focusing on their understanding of hygiene and traditional health practices during the coldest months. Imagine living in close quarters for months on end, with limited fresh air circulation, and a diet that, while nourishing, lacked the fresh variety of summer. These conditions presented a breeding ground for various ailments, from common colds and respiratory infections to more serious deficiencies. For the Vikings, maintaining health was not just a matter of comfort, it was crucial for the survival of the individual and the community. A sick person was a burden, and widespread illness could be devastating. One aspect where the Vikings might surprise modern listeners is their emphasis on hygiene. Contrary to some popular misconceptions, the Vikings were remarkably clean for their time. Regular bathing was not just about removing dirt, it was deeply ingrained in their culture and understood as a way to maintain health and vitality. Evidence suggests the use of steam baths or saunas, similar to those found in many northern cultures today. These could be small, separate bathhouses or even created within a longhouse by heating stones and pouring water over them to create steam. Imagine the profound relief and warmth of a steam bath after a long day in the biting cold. The heat would stimulate circulation, cleanse the skin, and soothe aching muscles, undoubtedly contributing to both physical and mental well-being. Regular washing, even if it was just a quick sponge bath with heated water, would have been practiced. Hair and beard care were also important. Combs made of bone or antler are frequently found at Viking sites, indicating that keeping hair and beards free of lice and debris was a regular practice. This wasn't just for aesthetics, it was a practical matter of preventing skin irritation and the spread of parasites in close living conditions. Clothing, though challenging to wash frequently in winter, would have been aired out and cleaned as much as possible to prevent the buildup of grime and dampness. When sickness did strike, the Vikings relied on a blend of practical knowledge and traditional remedies. Their understanding of herbal medicine was extensive. Knowledge of local plants, their properties, and how to prepare them would have been passed down through generations. Imagine a skilled individual within the community, perhaps an elder or a designated healer, preparing infusions, poultices, or salves from dried herbs, barks, and roots. For coughs and colds, remedies might include infusions from plants like thyme or elderflower, known for their soothing properties. For minor wounds or infections, poultices made from plantain or other antibacterial herbs might be applied. Digestive issues, common with a preserved diet, might be treated with caraway or other digestive aids. Beyond plants, certain animal products might have been used for medicinal purposes, such as rendered fats for salves or specific animal organs for their perceived health benefits. Bone setting and basic wound care were also practiced, demonstrating a pragmatic approach to physical injuries. They would have known to cauterize wounds or bind them tightly. While the term, vitamins, was unknown, the Vikings intuitively understood the role of diet in health. The emphasis on preserved foods like stockfish and fermented dairy was not just for calories. These foods, if properly processed, could provide essential nutrients. The inclusion of preserved root vegetables and dried berries, when available, would have been crucial for preventing scurvy, a debilitating disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, which was a common scourge for people on long voyages or with restricted winter diets. Their diverse approach to preservation indirectly provided a more balanced nutritional profile than one might assume. Finally, and perhaps most subtly, was the importance of mental health and morale during the isolating winter. The long months of darkness and confinement could easily lead to what we now call seasonal affective disorder, or simply a profound sense of gloom. The Vikings instinctively combated this through social interaction. The longhouse hearth was a hub of activity, storytelling, sagas, music, games, and communal meals. These shared experiences fostered a sense of belonging and camaraderie, vital antidotes to isolation. Maintaining some level of physical activity, even within the confines of the longhouse or venturing out for necessary chores, also played a role in keeping spirits up and bodies functional. The occasional visit of a traveling merchant or a family member from a nearby homestead would have been a significant event, breaking the monotony. The Viking approach to health in winter was holistic and pragmatic. It combined a surprisingly good understanding of hygiene with traditional remedies and a strong emphasis on community and activity. These practices allowed them not just to physically survive the cold, but to maintain their vitality and spirit through the long, demanding season. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to appreciate the quiet determination with which the Vikings sought to maintain their well-being, turning their homes into sanctuaries of health and their traditions into pillars of resilience. In our next chapter, we will delve deeper into these very social aspects, exploring how community, stories, and entertainment kept their spirits high during the long winter nights. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've explored the practical aspects of Viking winter survival, from shelter and clothing to food and health. But humans are more than just bodies. We have minds and spirits that also need nourishment, especially during the long, dark, and often isolating winter months. Tonight, we turn our attention to the winter spirit, delving into the profound importance of community, storytelling, and entertainment in keeping hope and resilience alive during the Norse winter. Imagine the profound silence that would descend upon the Norse landscape once the snow had muffled the sounds of the world. With fewer outdoor chores and the sun a rare visitor, the threat of monotony, loneliness, and even despair was very real. Yet, the Vikings found ways to banish the gloom, transforming their longhouses into vibrant centers of life and culture. The longhouse, which we explored as a physical fortress against the cold, now reveals itself as a social fortress as well. It was the central gathering place, not just for family but often for an entire extended household, including thralls, visitors, and perhaps distant relatives. The warmth emanating from the central hearth was magnetic, drawing everyone together, fostering a continuous, intimate sense of community. This constant proximity, while sometimes challenging, was ultimately a source of immense strength. At the heart of the winter spirit was storytelling. The Vikings lived in a rich oral tradition, where history, myths, legends, and personal sagas were passed down by word of mouth. The long, dark nights provided the perfect setting for these tales. Imagine gathered figures, lit by the flickering firelight, listening intently as a skilled storyteller recounted the heroic deeds of ancestors, the epic voyages to distant lands, the intricate genealogies of their families, or the dramatic tales of gods and monsters. These stories were more than just entertainment. They were vital threads connecting them to their past, shaping their identity, teaching moral lessons, and inspiring courage. They were a powerful antidote to the isolation, transporting listeners to other times and places. Related to storytelling was the art of poetry. Skaldic poetry, in particular, was highly valued. Skalds were poets who composed intricate verses, often in praise of jarls or kings, or recounting battles and significant events. These poems were complex, filled with kennings, poetic circumlocutions like whale road, for, sea, and alliteration, demanding skill to compose and listen to. Performances of such poetry around the hearth would have been a prized form of entertainment, stimulating the mind and elevating the spirit, showcasing intellectual prowess alongside martial strength. To pass the long hours and sharpen their minds, games were incredibly popular. Board games, in particular, provided intellectual challenge and friendly competition. The most famous Viking board game was Hnefatafl, often referred to as Viking chess, though its rules differ significantly. It was a strategic game of unequal sides, with one player controlling a king and his defenders, trying to escape, while the other player controlled a larger force of attackers, trying to capture the king. Evidence of these game boards and pieces, often beautifully carved from wood or bone, are found at archaeological sites. Imagine families engrossed in a quiet but intense game, strategizing their next move, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the occasional click of a game piece. Dice games were also common, offering a simpler, more immediate form of amusement. While archaeological evidence for formal music instruments from the Viking Age is somewhat limited compared to other cultures, it's almost certain that music and song were integral to their winter life. Simple stringed instruments, pipes, and drums would likely have accompanied singing. Songs could range from work songs to ballads, laments, or celebratory tunes, adding another layer of warmth and emotional expression to the longhouse atmosphere. Beyond formalized entertainment, the winter months were also a time for crafts and domestic activities. While these were productive, they were often undertaken communally. Repairing tools, weaving textiles, carving wood, spinning yarn, and preparing materials for the upcoming spring were all activities that could be done around the hearth, fostering conversation and shared purpose. This collective industriousness contributed to a sense of stability and preparedness, reducing anxiety about the future. Ultimately, the power of community was the strongest weapon against the winter's psychological toll. Shared meals, shared stories, shared laughter, and shared labor created an unbreakable bond. People relied on each other not just for physical safety but for emotional support. The simple act of being together, witnessing the familiar faces of family and friends, offered a profound sense of security and belonging in a vast, cold world. This constant interaction helped to ward off the gloom and maintain a vibrant, winter spirit, until the returning sun brought new life to the land. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to drift into the comforting embrace of a Viking longhouse, filled with the murmurs of conversation, the laughter of games, and the mesmerizing cadence of ancient tales. It is a powerful reminder that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit finds ways to connect, to create, and to thrive. In our next chapter, we will look at how the Vikings harnessed their livestock, their silent guardians, during these long winter months. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've journeyed through the Viking longhouse, felt the warmth of its hearth, appreciated the clever clothing, and even joined in the communal spirit of storytelling. Tonight, we turn our gaze to other crucial inhabitants of the Viking homestead, their livestock. These animals, often brought into the very fabric of their winter dwellings, were more than just possessions. They were silent guardians, providing heat, food, and vital resources throughout the long, cold months. Imagine the bustling activity of an autumn day on a Viking farm. Before the first deep snowfalls, a significant task was preparing the animals for winter. Unlike modern farming, where livestock are often housed in separate, heated barns, the Viking approach often integrated animals much more closely into human dwellings, particularly in the coldest regions. In many longhouses, especially those in Iceland, Greenland, and parts of Norway, a section of the house, often at one end, would be dedicated to sheltering livestock. This could be a partitioned-off area, perhaps with separate stalls or pens, but sharing a common roof and, crucially, sharing the ambient warmth of the main building. This practice of bringing animals indoors, or into directly attached shelters, served multiple, critical purposes. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly for human comfort, was the heat contribution of the animals themselves. The combined body heat of several cows, sheep, or goats generates a surprising amount of warmth. This natural, living warmth would permeate the surrounding structure, significantly raising the internal temperature of the longhouse, reducing the reliance on the central fire and conserving precious fuel. Imagine the subtle, steady warmth radiating from the animal stalls, a constant, living furnace for the home. Secondly, housing animals indoors provided essential protection for the livestock themselves. They were safe from the biting winds, the relentless snow, and opportunistic predators that might prowl the winter landscape. A dead animal in winter was not just a loss of food, but a loss of future milk, wool, and crucially, heat. However, bringing animals indoors presented its own set of challenges, particularly related to feeding. Pastures would be buried under snow, making grazing impossible. Therefore, the vast majority of fodder, hay, dried leaves, preserved branches, had to be gathered and stored during the short summer and autumn months. This was an immense labor. Fields would be scythed for hay, trees would be stripped of their leaves, and even certain types of seaweed might be collected along the coast. Every bundle of dried vegetation was a precious commodity, carefully stacked and protected from dampness and pests. The daily routine of feeding these animals indoors would be meticulous. Fodder had to be carefully rationed to last through the entire winter, often based on estimations of how long the cold season might persist. Imagine the daily task of doling out portions of dried hay, ensuring each animal received enough to survive, but no more than necessary. Watering livestock also became a challenge when lakes and rivers were frozen solid. Ice would need to be chopped from water sources, or snow would have to be melted over the longhouse fire to provide drinking water for the animals, adding yet another layer of labor to winter life. Despite these challenges, the benefits of keeping livestock close at hand in winter were invaluable. Heat contribution. As discussed, their body warmth was a constant, vital source of heat for the entire dwelling. Food source. While fresh meat was often reserved for special occasions or when an animal unexpectedly died, livestock provided a continuous supply of milk. This milk, in turn, was used for drinking, cooking, and for making butter, and crucially, for cheese and skyr, which were essential preserved dairy products. Materials. Sheep provided precious wool, which was shorn in spring but woven throughout the winter. Hides from cattle and other animals were vital for leather and parchment. Manure. The accumulation of animal waste, while requiring management, was a valuable resource. It could be collected and stored to be used as fertilizer for the fields in spring, enriching the soil for future harvests. In some cases, dried manure might even be used as a supplementary fuel source, particularly in areas with wood scarcity. Work animals. Horses, vital for transport in summer, might also be kept close by, available for pulling sleds or other winter tasks when the weather permitted travel. The symbiotic relationship between the Vikings and their animals was a finely tuned system of survival. Humans provided shelter and food for their animals, and in return, the animals provided warmth, sustenance, and materials that were absolutely critical for human life through the deepest cold. It was a constant cycle of labor, resource management, and mutual dependence. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to appreciate the quiet, living presence of these silent guardians within the Viking longhouse. Their warmth and resources were a testament to the integrated nature of Viking life and their profound understanding that survival in the Arctic cradle was a collective endeavor, encompassing every living being in their care. In our next chapter, we will shift our focus to the practical crafts conducted indoors, exploring the importance of ironwork and tool maintenance during the long winter months. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey through the Viking winter. We've explored how animals contributed warmth and sustenance, transforming the longhouse into a living, breathing sanctuary. Tonight, we delve into another crucial aspect of winter survival, the enduring power of iron and fire, as we learn about Viking blacksmithing and tool maintenance, essential crafts that sustained their daily lives and prepared them for the return of spring. Imagine the deep quiet of a winter's night in the longhouse, broken only by the crackle of the central hearth, and from a separate, often dedicated section of the dwelling, the rhythmic ring of hammer on anvil. For the Vikings, tools were not luxuries, they were fundamental to survival. From the axe that chopped firewood to the knife that butchered meat, every implement was vital. And winter, with its enforced indoors time, was the perfect season for their creation, repair, and meticulous maintenance. At the heart of this work was the blacksmith's forge. While large-scale iron smelting, the process of extracting iron from ore, was a major undertaking often done at specialized sites, the everyday blacksmith's forge was much more localized. It was essentially a controlled fire pit, often fueled by charcoal, designed to reach temperatures high enough to make iron malleable. This forge was itself a significant source of heat and light within the workshop area, adding to the overall warmth of the longhouse. The blacksmith, or smear as they were called, was a highly respected and essential figure in any Viking community. Their skills were passed down through generations, a blend of practical knowledge, immense strength, and artistic precision. Their primary tools were simple yet effective: the heavy hammer, used to shape the heated metal, various tongs for holding the glowing iron, and the sturdy anvil, a robust block of iron or stone upon which the metal was hammered. The most constant task during winter would have been tool maintenance. After months of use during the farming, hunting, and building seasons, axes would be dull, knives chipped, and agricultural implements worn. Imagine the careful process of bringing a dulled axe head to a red glow in the forge, then, with precise, rhythmic blows, hammering its edge thin and sharp once more. The hiss of the hot metal being quenched in water would fill the air, a sound of transformation and renewal. This meticulous sharpening and repair ensured that tools remained efficient and safe, crucial for preventing accidents and maximizing effort when spring returned. Beyond sharpening, repairing broken implements was a common necessity. A broken nail, a bent hinge on a chest, a snapped buckle, these might seem minor, but in a self-sufficient society, they could cause significant inconvenience or even hardship. The blacksmith could mend these items, often by heating and reshaping them, or by forge welding pieces together. This saved precious resources that would otherwise be spent on creating new items from scratch. And of course, blacksmiths also crafted new essential items. While grand swords and elaborate jewelry might capture the imagination, the everyday output was equally vital. Household items: robust iron hooks for hanging meat or tools, sturdy chains, simple lamps to hold animal fat, and various fittings for chests or doors. Agricultural implements: hoes, simple plows, and parts for carts or sleds were crucial for farm work, much of which was prepared in anticipation of spring. Personal items: while perhaps less ornate than those made by jewelers, blacksmiths would also produce functional items like buckles, rivets for leatherwork, and small, utilitarian knives. The very act of working with iron and fire was a powerful one. Fire, which provided life-saving warmth, here also acted as a transformative force, turning hard, cold metal into pliable, glowing material that could be shaped by human will. The rhythmic clang of the hammer, the intense heat radiating from the forge, and the smell of charcoal smoke created a unique sensory experience within the workshop, a testament to productive labor during the seemingly dormant winter. This winter work was a crucial element of Viking self-sufficiency. By producing and maintaining their own tools and essential metal goods, communities reduced their reliance on external trade during the months when travel was difficult. It was a proactive measure, ensuring that when the thaws came, and the land became workable again, they were ready. The blacksmith, hunched over his anvil in the glow of the forge, was quietly preparing his community for the challenges and opportunities of the seasons to come. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to absorb the comforting rhythm of the hammer on the anvil, a sound of skill, self-reliance, and enduring strength that echoed through the long, dark nights of the Viking winter. In our next chapter, we will broaden our view, comparing the Vikings' unique approach to winter survival with that of other cultures, and reflecting on the enduring lessons they offer. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've spent many chapters delving into the specifics of how the Vikings faced and conquered their formidable winters, from their sturdy longhouses to their intricate clothing and ingenious food preservation. Tonight, we broaden our perspective. We'll explore how the Vikings' methods of endurance echo the resilience of other northern cultures across the globe, while also recognizing the unique aspects of their particular approach. This chapter is about echoes of endurance comparing Viking winter survival to other cultures. Imagine the vast, cold expanse of the Earth's northern latitudes. From the icy reaches of the Arctic to the dense boreal forests of Siberia and North America, countless human societies have faced the same fundamental challenge: how to survive and thrive when winter imposes its relentless grip. While their specific solutions differed, shaped by their unique environments and available resources, a remarkable common thread of ingenuity and determination runs through them all. Let's begin by considering the Inuit and other indigenous Arctic peoples of North America and Greenland. These cultures represent the pinnacle of human adaptation to truly extreme cold, often living in environments far harsher and more barren than even the Viking homelands. Similarities with Vikings. Like the Vikings, the Inuit relied heavily on insulating shelters. While the Vikings built turf longhouses, the Inuit famously constructed igloos from snow, a testament to snow's incredible insulating properties. They also used sod houses for more permanent settlements, echoing the Viking use of earth. Both cultures depended utterly on hunting and fishing for sustenance, though the Inuit focused on marine mammals like seals and whales, and caribou, which were central to their diet and provided blubber for heat and light, and hides for clothing. Both used animal products extensively, furs for clothing, and sinews for thread. Key differences. The most striking difference was the treeless environment of much of the Arctic. Where Vikings used wood for structures and fuel, the Inuit relied on snow, stone, and whalebone for building, and blubber or driftwood for fuel. Their hunting techniques were highly specialized for the sea ice, using kayaks and sleds for mobility in ways distinct from the Vikings' forest and fjord adaptations. Next, let's look at the Sami people, the indigenous inhabitants of Lapland, stretching across northern Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Their history parallels the Viking era in many ways. Similarities with Vikings. Like the Vikings, the Sami lived in similar geographical areas and utilized natural resources adeptly. They relied heavily on furs and animal skins for their clothing and shelters, often using reindeer hides which offer exceptional warmth. They also practiced hunting and fishing. Key differences. A defining characteristic of many Sami groups was their semi-nomadic lifestyle, primarily centered around reindeer herding. While Vikings were largely settled farmers, many Sami moved with their herds, using portable shelters like the lavu, a tent-like dwelling, or the goti, a turf-covered hut designed for mobility. Their diet was profoundly shaped by reindeer products. Briefly, we can also cast our gaze eastward to the Siberian and Mongolian nomads. While not directly neighbors, they too faced vast, cold winters. Similarities. Their survival also hinged on animal reliance. Horses, sheep, and cattle were central. They lived in portable, insulated homes like the yurt or gyr, designed for easy dismantling and transport, emphasizing mobility over fixed settlement. Differences. Their environment was the vast, open steppes, leading to different travel methods and resource management compared to the coastal and forested lands of the Norse. So, what made the Viking approach to winter survival unique within this global tapestry of northern resilience? Integrated longhouse design. The unique integration of humans and livestock within the same large longhouse, as a combined heat-saving strategy, stands out. This wasn't just a separate barn, it was a deeply interconnected system. Agriculture with resource diversification. While many northern cultures were purely nomadic hunter-gatherers or herders, the Vikings maintained a strong base in agriculture. Barley, rye combined with extensive hunting, fishing, and significant trade. This diversified economy gave them multiple layers of security. Naval capabilities. Their unparalleled expertise in shipbuilding and seafaring allowed them to access diverse resources and settle in varied climates, from the comparatively milder conditions of Denmark to the truly Arctic challenges of Greenland. Their longships were not just tools of raiding, they were tools of expansion and resource acquisition, even in the cold season. Material culture mastery. Their advanced knowledge of ironworking meant they had access to robust tools for chopping wood, clearing land, and maintaining their homes and weapons, a technological advantage in some contexts. Their mastery of wool textiles and early forms of felted fabrics also provided superior insulation. Ultimately, Despite their differences, these diverse northern cultures share profound common threads: an incredible resourcefulness, a deep reliance on community for mutual support and morale, and an intimate, practical knowledge of their environment. They understood the cycles of nature, the properties of materials, and the subtle signs that predicted shifts in weather or the presence of food. The Viking story of winter survival is a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit, a spirit that, across continents and through the ages, has consistently found ingenious solutions to the most daunting challenges posed by the natural world. It reminds us that fundamental human needs often lead to remarkably similar innovations, echoing through time and culture. As you conclude this chapter, reflect on the vastness of human adaptability, and the quiet determination shared by those who have lived and thrived in the world's cold places. In our next chapter, we will delve into the lessons that the Vikings' resilience offers us in our modern world. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've explored the ingenious ways the Vikings mastered winter in their homelands and compared their methods to other resilient northern cultures. Tonight, we turn our gaze outwards, following the adventurous spirit of the Vikings as they pushed beyond their familiar shores, venturing into even colder, more unforgiving territories. This chapter is about the frosty frontier, winter in Viking exploration and settlement, and how their remarkable winter survival skills allowed them to reach places where others feared to tread. Imagine the boundless courage and ambition required to set sail into the unknown, not just for raiding or trade, but with the intention of establishing new homes, new communities, in lands where the promise of winter was even more daunting than what they already knew. The Viking sagas are filled with tales of these voyages, testament to a people unafraid to challenge nature's limits. The first significant step onto this frosty frontier was the settlement of Iceland. Around the late 9th century, Norwegians, many seeking new land and freedom from increasing monarchical power, began to settle this volcanic island in the North Atlantic. Iceland presented immediate and profound challenges, especially its winters. Unlike forested Norway, Iceland was largely treeless. This meant the crucial resource of timber for building longhouses and fuel was scarce, relying heavily on driftwood or imported wood. The Icelandic settlers quickly adapted. Their longhouses evolved to be even more dependent on turf construction, creating incredibly thick, deeply insulated walls that compensated for the lack of timber. They turned extensively to the ocean for sustenance, perfecting methods of fishing, particularly for cod and other abundant species, and preserving it as stockfish. Sheep became their most vital livestock, providing wool for warmth and sustenance, their hardy nature suited to the Icelandic climate. The ability to endure long, isolated winters was a prerequisite for success on this island frontier, and the Icelandic Norse, who thrive there to this day, became masters of this specific form of cold weather survival. Even more ambitious, and ultimately more tragic, was the attempt to settle Greenland. Led by Eric the Red in the late 10th century, Norse communities were established on the southwestern coast of Greenland. This was a truly formidable environment, far colder and more extreme than Iceland. The green in Greenland was more a marketing ploy than a literal description of its climate. The settlers built their turf longhouses and established farming communities, bringing their cattle, sheep, and goats. For centuries, these Norse Greenlandic settlements endured, a testament to the extreme limits of Viking adaptation. They hunted seals, caribou, and birds, supplementing their limited agriculture. They traded with their homeland, exchanging furs and walrus ivory for timber and iron. However, around the 15th century, these settlements mysteriously vanished. Modern archaeological and climatic research points to a combination of factors, but winter's relentless grip played a major role. The Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling, meant Greenland's already harsh climate grew even more severe. Ice conditions worsened, making travel and trade with Norway increasingly difficult and dangerous. Loss of trade. As contact with the outside world diminished, the Greenlanders lost access to crucial imports like iron, forcing them to rely on less effective materials. Inability to adapt sufficiently. While skilled, the Norse were farmers at heart, and struggled to fully adapt to the Arctic hunting techniques of the indigenous Inuit Skrælings, as the Norse called them, who moved into the area. The Inuit were far better equipped for the changing Arctic environment, including hunting seals through ice and whales from kayaks. The Norse, tied to their farms, couldn't shift their entire lifestyle. The story of Norse Greenland is a poignant reminder that even the most advanced survival skills have their limits when confronted with overwhelming environmental changes and a failure to fully adapt to truly alien conditions. It highlights that resilience is not just about enduring, but about continuous, radical adaptation. Briefly, the Vikings also made attempts to settle Vinland, modern-day North America, notably in Newfoundland, Lonso Meadows. These settlements, however, were short-lived, lasting only a few years. While the winters there were harsh, the primary challenges here were likely the presence of hostile indigenous populations and the vast, unfamiliar environment that made long-term self-sufficiency and defense untenable for such small groups. The ability to survive the cold was there, but other factors proved too challenging. The entire saga of Viking exploration and settlement into these frosty frontiers is a profound testament to their courage and optimism. It wasn't just about conquering lands, it was about conquering the very elements. They pushed the boundaries of human habitation, driven by a spirit of adventure, a need for land, and an unwavering belief in their ability to endure. Their successes in Iceland and their struggle in Greenland paint a vivid picture of the ultimate tests of winter survival skills. As you conclude this chapter, allow your mind to reflect on the audacity of these ancient mariners, venturing into the unknown and facing winters that would deter many today. Their story is one of incredible resilience, but also of the humbling power of nature, reminding us that even the most skilled survivors must ultimately yield to the forces of the earth when adaptation fails. In our penultimate chapter, we will draw modern lessons from the Vikings' enduring wisdom, applying their practical resilience to our contemporary lives. Welcome back to our soothing historical journey. We've traversed the icy fjords, huddled in longhouses, and felt the bite of the Norse winter alongside the Vikings. We've admired their ingenuity in crafting shelters, clothes, and tools, and their resilience in securing sustenance and maintaining their spirits. Tonight, as we approach the end of our journey, we'll reflect on the enduring wisdom gleaned from their experience. This chapter is about the winter's lullaby, lessons for modern times, exploring how the Vikings' ancient strategies offer valuable insights for our own lives, even in the 21st century. Imagine, for a moment, the vast difference between their world and ours. We have central heating, supermarkets, instant communication, and global supply chains. Yet, the fundamental human needs for warmth, food, security, and connection remain unchanged. And it is in these universals that the Viking experience speaks to us across the centuries, offering a quiet, comforting lullaby of practical wisdom. Perhaps the most apparent lesson is the importance of preparedness. For the Vikings, preparedness was literally a matter of life or death. The autumn harvest was a frantic, collective effort, ensuring enough food was stored to last the entire winter. Their homes were built with insulation in mind, and their clothing was meticulously crafted in layers. In our modern context, this translates to maintaining a well-stocked pantry, having emergency supplies readily available, and understanding the importance of energy efficiency in our homes. It means dressing appropriately for the weather, even when just stepping out for a short time. It's about taking proactive steps to minimize vulnerability, rather than reacting to crises. Closely related to preparedness is resourcefulness and adaptability. The Vikings didn't always have everything they wanted, but they knew how to make the most of what they had. When wood was scarce, they turned to turf and stone. When fresh food was unavailable, they mastered preservation. They were constantly learning and improvising. For us, this might mean learning new practical skills, whether it's cooking with basic ingredients, mending clothes, or understanding how our homes work. It's about fostering a mindset of problem-solving and creative thinking, adapting to unexpected challenges rather than being overwhelmed by them. It's a reminder that self-reliance, even in small ways, can be deeply empowering. The profound emphasis the Vikings placed on community and connection offers another powerful lesson. Their longhouses were not just dwellings, they were social hubs, reinforcing bonds through shared meals, stories, and labor. In a world where digital connections often replace real-world interaction, the Viking example reminds us of the irreplaceable value of genuine human contact. Taking the time to connect with family, friends, and neighbors, offering help, sharing resources, and simply being present for one another can combat the modern forms of isolation and foster a strong, supportive network. A strong community, like a well-insulated longhouse, provides vital warmth against the cold winds of life. The Vikings also teach us an appreciation for simple comforts. The warmth of a fire, the taste of a hot meal, the camaraderie of a shared story, these were not luxuries but life-sustaining joys during the long winter nights. In our consumer-driven world, Where we often chase fleeting pleasures, the Viking experience encourages us to find contentment and joy in the fundamental things. Curling up with a warm blanket and a good book, savoring a home-cooked meal, or simply listening to the gentle crackle of a fire, real or imagined, can offer profound solace and a deeper sense of well-being than more elaborate distractions. It's about rediscovering the quiet magic in the everyday. Finally, the Vikings embodied a remarkable sense of mindfulness and resilience. They didn't just endure winter. They accepted it as an intrinsic part of their year, adapting their entire lives to its rhythm. They understood that challenges, while difficult, could also forge strength and character. This translates to embracing the natural cycles of our own lives, understanding that periods of quiet or introspection can be just as valuable as times of outward activity. It's about developing psychological fortitude, facing adversity with a calm resolve, and knowing that just as winter eventually gives way to spring, difficulties will eventually pass. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense hardship, humanity possesses an incredible capacity to not just survive, but to find purpose and meaning. The boring history for sleep of the Vikings, far from being dull, offers a comforting lullaby of ancient wisdom. It whispers of a time when humanity lived in profound harmony with the seasons, building resilience, fostering community, and finding beauty and purpose even in the darkest, coldest nights. May these echoes of endurance bring you peace and a renewed sense of strength as you drift into a restful slumber. Welcome back for our final tranquil moments in this soothing historical journey. We've traveled together through the depths of the Norse winter, exploring the remarkable ingenuity and profound resilience of the Vikings as they conquered the coldest nights of the year. Tonight, in our concluding chapter, we will bring our journey to a gentle close, reflecting on the long night's end, a reflection on Viking winter mastery and the enduring spirit that allowed them to not just survive, but to truly master their formidable environment. Imagine the long, dark winter drawing to a close. The days, though still cold, are perceptibly lengthening. The sun, once a fleeting memory, begins to climb higher in the sky, casting longer, brighter rays. The sounds of cracking ice and melting snow begin to replace the stark silence. For the Vikings, this was not just the end of a season, but the triumph of their collective will, their foresight, and their unwavering spirit. Our journey began by understanding the sheer unforgiving nature of the Norse winter, the profound cold, the relentless darkness, and the silent, insidious threats it posed to life itself. We then peeled back the layers of their mastery, one by one. We saw how their shelters were masterpieces of insulation. The great longhouses, with their thick turf walls and living roofs, acted as immense thermal batteries, storing the warmth of the central hearth. This hearth was more than just a fire. It was the pulsing heart of their existence, providing warmth, light, and a focal point for all life within. Even the earth itself was harnessed, providing warmth in smaller, deeply insulated pit houses, or quickly improvised temporary shelters for those caught away from home. We clothed ourselves in their ingenious layers of life, understanding the unparalleled power of wool to insulate even when damp, the protective qualities of leather, and the supreme warmth of furs. We learned how essential specific garments were: the snug caps for the head, the warming mittens for the hands, and the robust, layered footwear that kept frostbite at bay. Our bellies were warmed by their resourceful diet. We discovered the meticulous methods of preserving the harvest through salting, smoking, and drying, ensuring that the bounty of summer could sustain them through the leanest months. And we tasted the hearty reality of their winter diet, rich in fats and proteins from dried fish and preserved meats, augmented by grains and stored root vegetables. We understood the comfort and caloric value of their fermented drinks, particularly ale and mead, which nourished both body and spirit. We then ventured outside, witnessing their mastery of mobility across the frozen landscape. The silent glide of their skis, the steady pace of their snowshoes through deep drifts, and the essential hauling power of their sleds allowed them to continue hunting, trading, and connecting, even when the world was blanketed in white. This mobility allowed them to still find fresh food through ice fishing and winter hunting, pursuing game and fish from beneath the ice, utilizing every part of their catch. Their focus on health and well-being extended beyond mere physical survival. We saw their emphasis on hygiene, including regular bathing, and their practical knowledge of herbal remedies and traditional medicine. But perhaps most profoundly, we felt the warmth of their winter spirit, the vital role of community, the captivating power of storytelling and sagas around the hearth, the challenge of games, and the shared joy of crafts, all working to combat isolation and maintain morale. We also looked to their silent guardians, the livestock that often shared their homes, contributing warmth and providing milk, wool, and other vital resources, a testament to the symbiotic relationship between humans and animals. And we briefly stepped onto the frosty frontier of their expansion into places like Iceland and Greenland, seeing how their survival skills allowed them to push the boundaries of human habitation, even when faced with ultimately insurmountable environmental shifts. The term, mastery, here is important. The Vikings didn't just passively endure winter. They actively engaged with it, adapting their entire society, their technology, and their culture to thrive within its confines. They weren't fighting nature. They were working with it, understanding its cycles and harnessing its properties to ensure their continued existence. Their ingenuity was not abstract. It was deeply practical, born of immediate necessity and honed by generations of lived experience. The enduring legacy of the Vikings is not just one of exploration and conquest, but of profound resilience and self-sufficiency in the face of immense environmental challenges. Their story reminds us that even in the most daunting circumstances, human ingenuity, community spirit, and a deep connection to the natural world can light the way through the longest, coldest nights. As our soothing historical journey now comes to its peaceful end, allow these echoes of Viking endurance to settle gently in your mind. Their strength, their warmth, their quiet determination, may these thoughts bring you a sense of calm and security, guiding you towards a truly deep and restful slumber. Thank you for joining us on this, boring history for sleep. May your own night be filled with peace and quiet comfort.